In this video, we examine iconic Qalipu Mikmaq Pretendian elder Calvin White, who has been a Pretendian for decades. We dug up some old Mikmaq newspapers from 1970s. We found a letter to the editor expressing concern after some of the West Coast so-called Mikmaqs from the west coast of Newfoundland were coming into the Federation of Newfoundland Indians. And here are some of Calvin White's responses. He was the vice president of the Federation of Newfoundland Indians in 1978. And here's what he got to say about his legitimacy and the legitimacy of those West Coast so-called Pretendian Mikmaqs. Here are Calvin's points in his article that he raises. Number one, there's no question of credibility for the Federation of Newfoundland Indians. The Federation has adequately educated its people through involvement with government because the government officials no longer interrupt them when they talk. So according to Calvin White, if you say you're Native and the government official stops interrupting you, then that gives you credibility. Number two, White said he didn't think there was any truth to their lacking credibility, and that some of their members were even invited to go eat with the Queen of England in St. John's. Geez, that gives them credibility. They got to go eat with the Queen of England in St. John's because they said they were Mikmaq Indians. That makes them Indian. Number three, White added that Cape St. George area received $5,000 between 1974 and 1976 for a recreation and capital grant, but nothing was received since that time. And number four, he added that it's his policy as vice president of the Federation of Newfoundland Indians to not react to any criticisms, which was questioning whether they were Mikmaq or not. White called those questions personal attacks and referred to the people questioning them as Deadwood, who at one time, he says, were part of the association. And it's our policy now to ignore these people. And we're sure that most of the readers now have a greater understanding of the Federation of Newfoundland Indians and realizes what's happening through this article. Well, no, Calvin White, this article was a bunch of hooey. And just like everything else out of your mouth is a bunch of bullshit because you're a Pretendian and your daughter, Judy White, capitalizes off this Pretendian identity. You got a whole slew of people to race shift to Mikmaq to go after the native money and rights. Let's talk about your family tree, Calvin White. Let's talk about who you are. Because I've done a deep dive down into your background, and I know who your ancestors are. Do you? I think you know, Calvin White, because you wrote a book about it. Your entire book was to just give legitimacy to you and your fake Mikmaqs on the west coast of Newfoundland. Let's look at your family tree, Calvin White. Let's look at your ancestors. This is Calvin White's family tree. Let's look at it. There's Calvin. His parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. Okay, you see these people down here? All these people from America? They were French people that were being kicked out of the USA. A lot of Calvin White's ancestors, they were either English or French. Most of them were. Okay, and they went to Western Newfoundland because they were being driven out. A lot of the French, as they were losing wars with the English, they were being kicked out. So they were getting kicked out of Nova Scotia, and he has some ancestors from Nova Scotia. They were Acadians. He has some who were kicked out of the USA. He also has some from Quebec. He has some directly from France. He has some from England. But when they went to Newfoundland, they wanted to assimilate. And it's my argument that because they were so French and they were getting kicked out everywhere, it suited them to identify as Mikmaq. And that's what a lot did. Okay? And a lot of them will assume that they are Mi'kmaq just because they're French Canadian. That's why you have so many French people in Canada race shifted. Henry Official was a Frenchman, right? And he married Marie Anne Official. Marie Anne Official was half Mi'kmaq. But you know when that was? Look at that. 1766, okay? So that's Anne Official, Marie Anne Official, in 1766 married Jean Charles. She was half Mi'kmaq. They had a daughter named Marie Camus. Marie Camus was 1/4 Mi'kmaq. She was born in 1811. Okay? His last 1/4 Mi'kmaq ancestor was in 1811. Okay, so she's the only one who probably could get Indian status in this tree. But she's dead now. She's been dead since 1866 or something. Now, we have to look at the break situation. Jane Matthews, they claim, was Mikmaq in 1773, married Ralph Edwards Brake. But we couldn't find evidence of that. We did find a birth record that she was born in England. Okay, so even their claims that this woman was Mikmaq, whether she was Mikmaq or not doesn't really, it's immaterial because it's too far back. It's in the 1700s. Again, if she were Mikmaq, it does not make him Mikmaq in 2024. Okay, now you see Calvin White is mostly all of these people, with the exception of this one in this line. All these people are white people. This is the great-great-grandparents. So you got 1/4 great-great-grandparent, and all these other people are white people, right? So then they become whiter and whiter, and then as they get down here, they're white. That makes him white, and his daughter, Judy White, Senator Judy White. She's a white woman, just like her daddy. The Nova Scotia Mi'kmaqs knew that Calvin White was not a Mi'kmaq person. That's why they were writing letters to the editor in 1978 and had to get Calvin White to address the claims, which he could not do because he's a white man.